Good afternoon, everyone. This is the news with b.c.begley. I am your host, and it's Monday, October the 20th, 2025. And here are your top news stories for today. The U.S. Secret Service recently discovered a suspicious hunting stand near Palm Beach International Airport with a clear view of where President Donald Trump exits Air Force One. Agents found the elevated stand on Thursday during a routine security sweep before President Trump's return to West Palm Beach. The FBI has taken over the investigation, which is now being led by Director Kash Patel. Patel stated that no individuals were found at the scene and that the stand has not been linked to anyone yet. The FBI has deployed forensic teams and cell phone analyst units to collect and examine evidence. Secret Service spokesperson confirmed cooperation with the FBI and local Palm Beach law enforcement. He also emphasized that the discovery did not disrupt any presidential movements or pose an immediate threat. Authorities believe the stand may have been placed months ago. This investigation follows the recent conviction of Ryan Ruth, who attempted to assassinate President Trump from a sniper's nest on a Palm Beach golf course, Fox News has reported. That incident occurred just weeks after Trump was shot in the ear during a rally in Butler, Pennsylvania. The United States Marine Corps has opened an investigation after shrapnel from a 155mm artillery shell struck a California Highway Patrol vehicle during a live-fire demonstration at Camp Pendleton. The round reportedly detonated prematurely in the air during Saturday's 250th Marine Corps anniversary celebration, which had been promoted by the White House. No one was injured, but a CHP patrol car was damaged while officers were helping divert traffic on Interstate 5. CHP officials called the incident, quote, unusual and concerning, noting that live-fire training rarely occurs near active highways. Marine officials confirmed that the artillery round may have exploded outside the designated impact area and said all safety protocols had been followed. Photos from the CHP showed shrapnel damage to the vehicle's hood and fragments found nearby. California Governor Gavin Newsom criticized the event as dangerous and reckless, arguing that firing live munitions near an interstate could have killed someone. The celebration, attended by Vice President J.D. Vance and Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, had already drawn Newsom's objections over safety and traffic closures, NBC News has reported. The Trump administration defended the demonstration, calling it a standard and safe Marine Corps exercise. Both the CHP and Marine Corps said they will review the incident to improve safety and coordination in future events. During a heated White House meeting, President Donald Trump warned Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky that Ukraine would be, quote, destroyed if it refused to accept Russia's peace terms. The discussion reportedly escalated into shouting, with President Trump tossing aside maps of Ukraine's front lines that President Zelensky had brought to demonstrate the situation on the ground. Zelensky traveled to Washington seeking additional U.S. support, including long-range Tomahawk missiles, in exchange for thousands of Ukrainian-made drones. But President Trump rejected the request, calling it a dangerous escalation. Instead, Trump pressed for a ceasefire that would freeze the front lines as they stand, effectively locking in Russia's territorial gains. He also argued Ukraine to surrender the entire Donbass region as part of a settlement, arguing that it would end the war quickly. Zelensky pushed back, insisting that Putin had no real interest in peace and that greater pressure on Moscow was needed. Despite the tense exchange, both leaders later described the meeting as, quote, positive, with Zelensky saying Trump had an opportunity to help end the war, the U.S. Sun has reported. European officials expressed alarm over President Trump's tone and perceived alignment with Russian interest, particularly after his recent phone call with Putin and plans for an in-person summit in Hungary. As Trump calls for rapid ceasefire, Russia has intensified its bombardments across multiple Ukrainian regions, targeting civilians and infrastructure. Zelensky vowed that Ukraine would not surrender more land and renewed his appeal for Western weapons, saying his nation still seeks peace, but at no cost of its sovereignty. Until conservative commentator Charlie Kirk was killed there last month, Utah County, Utah was known mainly for its farms, orchards, and growing tech industry, not national news headlines. The assassination shocked the quiet community and left local officials scrambling to fund what could be a years-long multi-million-dollar murder trial. County leaders estimate the case will cost about $5 million, or 3.3% of their annual budget, covering defense fees, extra prosecutors, and heavy security whenever accused shooter Tyler Robinson is moved. Robinson, who is jailed without bail, faces the death penalty, and his next hearing is set for October the 30th. Commissioners say they've struggled to balance the financial and the emotional strain, especially since neither Robinson nor Kirk lived in the county. Finding defense lawyers willing to take high-profile case proved difficult, but a 3-member team, 2 from California and 1 from Salt Lake City, eventually agreed to represent Robinson. Some residents have protested paying for the defense, but officials insist that ensuring competent representation is essential to prevent costly retrials. County staff are combing through budgets to reallocate funds and avoid tax hikes while dealing with the emotional toll of the tragedy, the Wall Street Journal has reported. The local government is also funding mental health support for university students and employees affected by the killing, as Utah County braces for a media storm reminiscent of past infamous cases. Officials say their priority is to conduct a fair and secure trial that will stand up to national scrutiny. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said on Sunday that humanitarian aid into Gaza will only resume if Hamas halts what he called, quote, massive bombings and continues to turn over the remains of hostages, a stance the Prime Minister's office framed as a response to recent ceasefire violations. Earlier that day, Netanyahu ordered the suspension of aid convoys and the closure of all crossings after Hamas breaches of the truce, including an attack in Rafah that killed 2 IDF soldiers. He initially announced that pedestrian crossings through Rafah would also be blocked, as Israel launched a new wave of airstrikes, the most intense since the hostage for ceasefire deal and partial withdrawal. Netanyahu met with senior defense officials Sunday evening and emphasized that Israel would respond to every violation while asserting it still sought to uphold the ceasefire, quote, but not at any cost. The PMO later clarified that aid deliveries would resume once the bombing stopped and Hamas continued to release hostage remains at a, quote, reasonable pace, and Israeli officials said the shift in wording followed heavy U.S. pressure, the Jerusalem Post has reported. Hardline Israeli ministers reacted angrily. Some labeled Hamas, quote, a Nazi terrorist organization. The developments underline growing tensions over the fragile agreement and competing domestic pressures on Israel's government. Okay, here's a look at the live weather radar from the National Weather Service, and now let's go to the national forecast for today. An active weather pattern is affecting the United States, led by a low-pressure system moving north of the Great Lakes into southern Canada. This system and an associated cold front will bring locally heavy rain and isolated thunderstorms to New England today, followed by cooler, breezy conditions in the east. A developing low over the northern plains will move toward the Great Lakes on Tuesday, bringing rain, gusty winds, and colder weather to the northern tier states. Meanwhile, the southern plains will experience unseasonably warm temperatures in the 80s and the 90s today, with dry conditions continuing across the southwest. Mountain snow in the northern Rockies is tapering off, and the mid-Atlantic and New England will see scattered rain Tuesday night into Wednesday. The Louvre is facing intense scrutiny after thieves stole priceless jewels in just 7 minutes. The French Justice Minister admitted the heist was a major security failure for France. Police believe the robbery was executed by an organized crime group, with 60 investigators working on the case. 4 masked thieves used a furniture hoist and cutting equipment to access the Apollo Gallery in full daylight. They stole 9 19th-century jewels, including the heavily jeweled crown of Empress Eugenie, which was damaged during the escape. Questions have been raised about unsecured windows and inadequate security measures at the museum. Recent thefts at French museums have highlighted security weaknesses, which France's interior minister called a, quote, major weak spot. The French president, Emmanuel Macron, promised that efforts are underway to catch the perpetrators and recover the stolen items, The Guardian has reported. Trade unions criticized underinvestment in staff and security at cultural institutions, warning that collections, visitors, and staff are all at risk. A forthcoming state audit reportedly revealed delays in updating security equipment and insufficient cameras in many Louvre rooms, despite prior request for a security review. U.S. President Donald Trump announced that he will cut United States aid to Colombia and impose tariffs because he claims that President Gustavo Petro is not stopping drug production. President Trump called Petro, quote, an illegal drug leader and threatened unilateral action if Colombia does not act against narcotics. U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth confirmed a recent U.S. strike on a boat allegedly linked to the Colombian rebel group ELN. Petro denied the accusations, defended his anti-drug efforts, and then condemned U.S. strikes that killed civilians, calling them attacks on Colombia's sovereignty. The Colombian Foreign Ministry labeled President Trump's statements a direct threat, and Defense Minister Pedro Sanchez highlighted Colombia's ongoing fight against drug trafficking. The United States has increased military operations in the region, including naval and aerial actions against drug cartels and Venezuela, NPR has reported. Colombia has historically been a key U.S. ally and a top recipient of aid, but coca cultivation recently reached record levels. Tensions between Petro and Trump have escalated over visa revocations, tariffs, and U.S. military actions in Colombian waters. U.S. President Donald Trump insisted that the ceasefire in Gaza remains in effect despite Israeli strikes following alleged Hamas attacks near Rafah. Israel accused Hamas of killing 2 soldiers beyond the agreed, quote, yellow line, but President Trump suggested Hamas leadership may not have been involved. The Israel Defense Forces said it had begun renewed enforcement of the truce after the incident. Trump stated the situation would be handled, quote, toughly but properly, and that he would review the justification for Israeli strikes. His special envoy, Steve Witkoff, and Jared Kushner traveled to Israel to meet Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, with Vice President J.D. Vance and his wife also expected to visit. Tensions were fueled by Hamas's failure to return all the bodies of the deceased hostages and disputes over the entry of aid into Gaza. Palestinian authorities reported at least 23 deaths from Israeli strikes that day, while Hamas denied involvement and then accused Israel of fabricating pretext, NBC News has reported. Hamas claimed Israel had committed 80 ceasefire violations in just over a week, resulting in dozens of deaths and hundreds of injuries. Israel emphasized that anyone crossing the yellow line would be considered a target, while efforts were underway to clearly mark the boundary. Families on both sides continue to struggle with locating and burying their loved ones, highlighting the human toll of the fragile ceasefire. A Boeing 747 cargo plane skidded off a Hong Kong runway and then hit a security patrol vehicle before both fell into the sea, killing the 2 people in the car. The 4 crew members aboard the plane were all unhurt. The aircraft, operated by Turkey-based ACT Airlines under a wet lease to Emiratis, was arriving from Dubai around 3:50 a.m. local time. The pilots did not request assistance before landing and had taxied halfway down the runway before veering off to the left. Airport authorities confirmed the patrol car did not enter the runway, and the collision occurred outside of the fence. Rescue crews found the plane broken into 2 parts in the sea, with the crew waiting at the open door. Divers recovered the 2 security workers after a 40-minute search, the Associated Press has reported. The crash occurred on Hong Kong's North Runway, which remained closed while other runways continued operating. Weather was suitable at the time, and the Air Accident Investigation Authority opened an inquiry into flight systems, operations, and maintenance. Emiratis confirmed the aircraft was empty of cargo, 32 years old, and under a wet lease providing crew, maintenance, and insurance. South Korea has taken a North Korean soldier into custody after he crossed the DMZ line. The soldier was tracked and then monitored by South Korean forces before being secured. Media reports suggested the soldier expressed a desire to defect after being approached by a South Korean soldier. If confirmed, he would join tens of thousands of North Koreans who have fled the North since the Korean War. Direct crossings between the two Koreas are rare and dangerous due to landmines and heavy surveillance. Most defectors instead flee via North Korea's border with China before eventually reaching the South. Analysts noted that the soldier was familiar with the area and may have helped him navigate the border, and he could provide South Korea with valuable intelligence. The last North Korean soldier to defect was in August of the previous year, Al Jazeera has reported. The crossing occurred 4 months after South Korean President Lee Jae-myung took office, promising dialogue and cooperation with North Korea. Diplomatic efforts on the peninsula have been stalled since U.S.-North Korea talks collapsed in 2019 under the Trump administration. Today is October the 20th, 2025, and on this day in history, in the year 1803, the United States completed the Louisiana Purchase with France, doubling the size of the nation. In the year 1973, the President of Egypt and the President of Israel agreed to a ceasefire in the Yom Kippur War. And in the year 2011, Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi was captured and killed, ending his 42-year reign. October 20th is also the official National Fruit Day. Alright, it's 16 past the hour, and let's do a quick market update. The NASDAQ is up 1.41%. Gold is up 2.23%. Oil is down 1.28%. Bitcoin is up 1.84%. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is up 0.93%. And the S&P 500 is up 1.0%. And now let's go to the top U.S. stories for today. Typhoon Halong devastated remote western Alaskan villages, leaving thousands unable to return home for at least 18 months, Alaskan Governor Mike Dunleavy has warned. Governor Dunleavy requested a major disaster declaration from U.S. President Donald Trump to secure federal funding for the lengthy recovery. The typhoon brought 100-mile-per-hour winds and storm surges up to 8 feet above high tide, destroying homes, roads, and communications in several villages. About 90% of the structures in Kipnuk and a third in another village were lost, leaving power outages and water shortages. More than 1,500 residents were evacuated to larger cities, many facing extended displacement through winter. The approaching Arctic winter poses additional challenges, with some communities potentially uninhabitable during the cold months. The Alaska National Guard airlifted over 600 people, while shelters in Bethel and Anchorage and other cities quickly filled. Alaska Senators Dan Sullivan and Lisa Murkowski urged federal aid to restore housing, utilities, and heating fuel before the winter, the USA Today has reported. 1 woman died in the storms, and 2 others still remain missing. Recovery efforts are expected to be long due to the extensive destruction and the harsh environmental conditions. Human remains found in a shallow grave at an abandoned Philadelphia school are believed to be 23-year-old Kata Scott, who went missing 2 weeks ago. Police said the medical examiner will confirm the identity and determine the cause of death. The remains were discovered in a wooded area after a, quote, very specific anonymous tip led officers to search that site. Earlier in the week, police had recovered items belonging to Scott, including a cell phone case, an iPad case, glasses, and a card with her name. Scott was last seen on October the 4th, leaving for work at a nearby nursing home, but did not complete her shift. Authorities said Scott had reported being harassed via phone in the days before her disappearance. Keon King, who was 21 years old, has now been charged with kidnapping in connection to Scott's disappearance, and is believed to have been the last person in contact with her, ABC News has reported. Police recovered King's vehicle, a 1999 metallic gold Toyota Camry, after receiving public tips. The mayor and the police have all expressed support for Scott's family during this difficult time, and investigators remain committed to uncovering the truth and ensuring that justice is served. Federal prosecutors have asked a Virginia judge to quickly rule on how potentially privileged materials in the criminal case against former FBI Director James Comey should be handled. The motion concerns lead defense attorney Patrick Fitzgerald, who may face a conflict of interest due to his prior involvement in Comey's handling of FBI memoranda. Prosecutors proposed a filter protocol to allow a separate team to review communications for privilege before the trial team accesses them. The evidence, seized from a lawyer under a court-approved warrant, may include exchanges between Comey and Fitzgerald. Comey was indicted on September the 25th on felony counts of making false statements and obstruction of justice. His lawyers have signaled intentions to challenge the charges as selective and politically motivated. The Inspector General's 2019 report detailed Comey's sharing of memos with Fitzgerald and other attorneys after his 2017 dismissal, some of which later reached the media, Newsweek has reported. Prosecutors argue expediting review of the quarantined material will prevent trial delays and ensure access to relevant non-privileged information. Defense objections focused on challenging the underlying search warrants rather than implementing the proposed filter protocol. The case raises complex issues involving attorney-client privilege, potential conflicts, classified information, and the integrity of the prosecution in a politically charged context. Authorities are investigating the death of a BNSF railway conductor who was struck by a passing train in Columbus, Montana on Sunday. The incident occurred around 9:40 a.m. local time when the conductor was reportedly between two trains, one of which was moving. Columbus Fire Rescue's Assistant Chief, Nick Jacobs, said it was unclear how the conductor was struck. The National Transportation Safety Board and the Federal Railroad Administration responded to the scene. BNSF referred all questions about the incident to the NTSB. The identity of the deceased has not yet been released, the Associated Press has reported. Columbus is a small town of about 2,000 people, and it's located 40 miles southwest of Billings, Montana. A 2023 FRA report found that while BNSF generally works to improve safety, frontline workers sometimes hesitate to report concerns due to fear of discipline. The report was part of a broader review of major U.S. railroads following the 2023 Norfolk Southern train derailment in East Palestine, Ohio. Investigators are examining the circumstances to determine how the fatal accident occurred. A driver plowed into a child's birthday party in Maryland on Saturday night, killing one woman and injuring multiple others. The incident occurred around 10 p.m. local time in a yard tent where partygoers had gathered. Authorities are investigating it as a fatal hit and run. The driver, a 66-year-old man, later turned himself in. The deceased victim was identified as 31-year-old Ashley Hernandez Gutierrez from Washington, D.C. In total, 13 people were injured, including 8 children and 5 adults. 6 of the juvenile victims have been treated and released, while 1 remains hospitalized in stable condition. 3 adult victims were admitted and are all in stable condition. 1 is pending treatment and 1 has been released, Fox News has reported. The incident took place in Prince George's County, about 6 miles from Washington, D.C. Authorities are asking anyone with information to contact the police department's Criminal Investigations Division. Hey, real quick, while you're here, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you can stay up to date on all of our news updates. And now let's go to the last block of news stories for today. China's economy grew 4.8% in the third quarter, the slowest in a year, but matching analyst expectations despite a real estate slump. Fixed asset investment, including real estate, fell 0.5% in the first 9 months, with property investment dropping 13.9%, the steepest decline in years. Excluding real estate, investment and private sector spending slowed, signaling weakened confidence in the economy, CNBC has reported. Industrial production grew 6.5% in September, but experts warned that persistent weakness in investment could pressure future GDP growth. SpaceX has launched over 10,000 Starlink satellites into low Earth orbit, with 56 added on Sunday during the 132nd Falcon 9 launch of 2025, tying the annual launch record with months remaining. Of these, About 8,608 are currently operational, each with a typical 5-year lifespan before deorbiting. Starlink began with prototypes in 2018 and a commercial service in 2021, aiming to provide fast, low-latency global internet, The Verge has reported. Competing mega constellations from Amazon, Europe, and China raise concerns about space overcrowding. L'Oréal will acquire Keurig's beauty unit, including the Creed fragrance line, for €4 billion, marking its largest deal in 116 years. The move expands L'Oréal's luxury fragrance portfolio and gives it a 50-year license to develop products under Bottega Veneta, Balenciaga, and eventually Gucci. Keurig, which bought Creed for €3.5 billion back in 2023, aims to reduce debt and focus on fashion, Axios has reported. The companies will also form a 50-50 joint venture to explore opportunities beyond fragrances, highlighting the enduring market for the true luxury beauty. Rodrigo Paz, a previously little-known centrist senator, won Bolivia's presidential election with 54% of the vote, defeating former right-wing President Jorge Quiroga, who conceded. Paz's victory reflects voter frustration with the MAS party's 20-year rule and economic mismanagement, attracting support from working-class and rural voters weary of Quiroga's radical IMF-backed policies. Paz aims to implement major economic reforms, including ending the fixed exchange rate, reducing fuel subsidies, and scaling back public investment, while maintaining some social benefits to avoid social unrest, NPR has reported. His Christian Democratic Party holds a slim congressional majority, meaning compromise will be necessary to execute his ambitious agenda. Sanae Takaichi is poised to become Japan's first female prime minister after securing a coalition with the conservative Japan Innovation Party. The 64-year-old LDP leader seeks to end a 3-month political deadlock following her party's loss in the July elections. Her previous coalition partner, and centrist, split over concerns about her ultra-conservative stance and the LDP's handling of corruption scandals, the Associated Press has reported. The new alliance sets joint priorities on diplomacy, security, and energy, allowing Takaichi to secure enough votes for Tuesday's parliamentary confirmation. U.S. President Donald Trump met with Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese at the White House as the U.S. government shutdown enters its 4th week. The leader signed a rare earth minerals agreement aimed at competing with China's sector dominance. Meanwhile, the Senate is set to vote for the 11th time on a stopgap funding measure, with military pay emerging as a key point in the GOP shutdown strategy, The Hill has reported. Democrats also face questions over the weekend's No Kings protest, reflecting growing centrist frustration amid the ongoing stalemate. At the center of the Milky Way galaxy, a mysterious gamma-ray glow has puzzled scientists since NASA's Fermi telescope detected it way back in 2008. While some astronomers attribute the glow to pulsars, spinning remnants of exploded stars, others suggest it may come from collisions of dark matter, an invisible substance 5 times more abundant than regular matter. New supercomputer simulations show that dark matter could produce the bulge-shaped glow, previously thought to favor the pulsar theory, CNN has reported. This finding keeps both explanations viable and raises the possibility that evidence of dark matter could finally be observed. George Santos, the former Republican congressman from New York, said he now plans to focus on prison reform after President Donald Trump commuted his 7-year sentence for wire fraud and identity theft. Released on Friday, Santos described his 84 days in federal prison as, quote, dehumanizing, and criticized the facilities for poor conditions, including mold, broken air conditioning, and shoddy construction. He expressed a desire to use his experience to make prisons more humane and told Trump of his mission to support reform efforts, the BBC has reported. Santos also said he has no plans to return back to politics for at least the next decade. The trial of former Illinois Deputy Sean Grayson began on Monday in Peoria over the fatal shooting of Sonia Massey, a 36-year-old black mother of 2. It took place back in July of 2024. Massey was shot 3 times after calling authorities about a suspected prowler. Officer Grayson claimed he feared for his safety because she was holding boiling water and made religious statements. Grayson, who was fired and charged with first-degree murder and other counts, pleaded not guilty, and the trial is expected to last 1 or 2 weeks with no cameras allowed in the courtroom, NBC News has reported. The case sparked a national protest and a $10 million settlement for Massey's family, with demonstrators outside the courthouse demanding justice and accountability for police actions. Nearly 50 small fighting robots, each weighing 1.5 kilograms or less, competed at the United Kingdom Championships in Bristol, hosted by the Bristol Bot Builders, to promote STEM education. The event featured intense battles, with robots using spinning discs and other mechanisms to disable opponents, attracting around 300 spectators. Organizers emphasized that participants come from all walks of life, using the competitions to learn about science and engineering, the BBC has reported. The tournament also showcased innovative technology, including an autonomous robot, highlighting the creativity and community within the robot building scene. NASA's OSIRIS-APEX mission, which will fly alongside the near-Earth asteroid Apophis in 2029, received a $20 million funding allocation to continue operations for the next fiscal year. The spacecraft, repurposed from the OSIRIS-REx mission that sampled asteroid Bennu, will study Apophis's close flyby of Earth to understand how such encounters affect small bodies. The funding secures a 2026 through 2027 operations, but doesn't guarantee future support, as Congress reviews NASA's budget annually, Live Science has reported. While OSIRIS-APEX moves forward, the fate of 18 other missions remains uncertain due to the ongoing government shutdown. Gold prices surged over 2% on Monday, driven by expectations of U.S. interest rate cuts and safe haven demand ahead of U.S.-China trade talks and delayed inflation data. Spot gold rose to $4,336.94 per ounce, with December futures climbing 3.3%, following a record high last Friday. Investors anticipate further gains, with analysts projecting prices could reach $4,500 or even $5,000 per ounce next year amid ongoing political and economic uncertainty, Reuters has reported. Silver and platinum also gained, reflecting broader strength in precious metals markets. Okay, everybody, that is our show for today. I hope all of you have enjoyed it, and I will see all of you tomorrow at 12 noon Eastern Standard Time for another episode of The News with BC, and until then, I hope everyone has a great rest of your day.